Hi everyone, and welcome to our woodland walk for the month of February, the Rowan Tree. And we have a wonderful guest with us this month. Welcome to you, Court Wing.
Hi, thanks so much, Dr. Watts. Just a real pleasure being with you all today, and very happy and excited to share what we've discovered with the ACER community. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes,
ACER?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, Lisa, yeah.
And I suppose, do you want some of my background, or did you want
Yes,
to?
please. If you could give us a little bit of an introduction of yourself,
Sure.
your journey, and the work you're doing now would be wonderful. Thank you.
So I have a 30 plus year background in performance and pain. Um, I was a live-in apprentice to the chief instructor of the United States in Ki-Aikido. Competed internationally on national criteria videos. Then I went back to acting school. Graduated from SUNY Purchase, Conservatory of Theater Arts and Film in 2005. During that time while I was there, and there's a lot of very intensive somatic training to that practice, a lot of emotional processing that's so important to that endeavor. But at the same time, um, also got into kettlebell training very early on. That led me to joining to one of the very first CrossFits in the country back in my hometown of Seattle. I'm trying to make this quick. That led to me going on to co-found the very first CrossFit in all of New York, which eventually became one of the largest and biggest in the world. So once I graduated, started just spreading the good word there. Um, and I was known for helping people with returning to activity post injury, being able to help very tricky mobility issues, and eventually got featured in things like the New York Times and stuff, um, USA Today, Men's Fitness, but all that glitters is not gold. And at the time, I had a business partner who was committing a Ponzi scheme. So that kind of financially devastated my family once that all came to light. And there's a lot of um, trauma associated with that. And simultaneously, I had a one of my best friends in the world was a gym member who was also the head of the UN security advisor. Worked with him to develop their fitness assessment program and everything. But at age 41, he got colon cancer and had to go through very intensive surgery and then rehabbed, and I helped rehab him. But then 6 months after full remission, he relapsed, and I ended up, sitting at his deathbed asking if I could pass his name on. So just really getting kind of crushed down by life. And at the same time, I had ongoing chronic pain. Here I was helping all these people with fitness issues, helping people with all these increasingly intractable pain conditions. But I was suffering from pretty significant low back pain myself, and what I would have to now kind of classify as maybe low grade fibromyalgia or something, just overall body aches and pains. Anyways, but specific to this conversation today, um, I had been certified through a system called Z Health as well, which is initially a mobility approach, but in fact was based on lesion and stroke studies using applied neurophysiology. So I was very familiar with how neuroplasticity can be driven through different inputs, that there's this state of plasticity that's available at all times to us, but it's like what makes it salient, what makes it impactful, what makes it enduring, how you drive neuroplastic change. And usually this was once again for people with pain or mobility issues. So I was aware of all this science going on in the background, but then very specifically, like I eventually left that gym that I had founded. The ex business partner went off to prison, and I thought everything would be fine, but my friend died, and I just went into this intractable depression. And I was something like 15 years sober at the time from alcoholism. I thought I'd left all that stuff in the past, but it was getting worse and worse and worse. And so I eventually decided I'm going to try going back on psychotropics and see how this goes, because it's starting to get daily suicidal ideation, classic male presentation of irritability, withdrawal, all of that. And the the psychoactives that I've used before, the I'm sorry, the medicines I've used before stopped. They weren't working. But I was aware in the background that your research and other universities was starting to have these striking results with depression. And eventually I found that there was one going on at NYU. And so I signed up and shockingly got in. I was like, I guess a rare profile or something, got past all the exclusionary criteria. And it was March 5th, 2020, where was my dosing day. And my MADRS scores, that's a standard assessment for depression, were in the low 40s. So moderate, severe. By the end of my dosing day, I was in complete remission, like that. And it had only been weeks before I had read some paper, I believe, by Calvin Lai. Sorry if I've got that wrong. Just highlighting the structural neuroplasticity and showing these remission, like dendritic arborization, dendritic complexity, spinal trunk density, and things of that nature. Um, Very robustly returning, and but the remission rates are just like astonishing, like 33% in full remission by the end of the day. And it's like, wow, that's really something. But it's just such a qualitatively different experience than things like SSRIs and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, you've got to be kidding me. This can't be this complete this rapidly, right? And then I'm sure you've seen the shock and the gratitude where it just spreads like a dawn across people's face. That how can it be this effortless? Not that, not that the experience is effortless. But the most astonishing thing was the next day I was completely out of chronic pain. I woke up. I used to be known for having some of the best movement in my gym. I had become a non-responder or even a negative responder to exercise and mobility. And I wasn't lacking for knowledge, resources, or networks to consult with people, and nothing had been working. And suddenly I could do one-legged pistol squats again. My joint tissue quality, I swear to God, changed overnight. And it was like it had gone from being crackly and crunchy to being silent and smooth. Um, Motor control was back, like, accuracy and things like that. And then I was just kind of marveling at it. And I just said to myself all at once, just downloaded, like, with remission being driven this rapidly and robustly, and with this extraordinarily rich visual field interaction, why can't you combine high dose psilocybin with mirror box therapy to treat phantom limb pain? Like, like that. And it just caught me. And the thing is, I had already learned about mirror box therapy, V.S. Ramachandran's neurovisual modulation for dealing with people with phantom limb pain. And, that was something we talked about all the time within my system. And I already knew of cluster headaches being treated with high dose psilocybin. So, yeah, it came together, but it's not till I experienced it directly myself. And then NYC 10 days later went on lockdown for the pandemic. So I had nothing to do but research online. And like I had been pursuing the research um, pretty intensely, looking up every study that had been done and like watching every video of every researcher that I could. And I just want to say thanks to you, because you described what happened to participants in some of the trials there in England where they would go through and they would go into remission, and it would be this wonderful moment for a few weeks, but then the trial would end and they're not getting ongoing integration. They're not going and getting psychotherapy, and probably pretty crucially, not getting any more psilocybin. And I was going to be damned if I was going to go back into relapse. And so immediately found a trauma informed therapist who I'm still working with today, and then just made sure I was following what would be considered best practices if someone were to be using this in an ongoing manner. And like, so 10 months later, made sure that that neuroplastic window opened up again with my work. But the thing is with the chronic pain, it was so glaringly obvious that the day after, when I was in that pain-free window, and then that kind of revelation came to me about how could we use this with adjunctive therapy. There was this clear, well-delineated neuroplastic and analgesic window. I was pain-free, and it wasn't like other types of analgesic drugs that, pain relieving drugs. It's like this was like a switch had been turned off. And there was core functionality that was clearly being restored. And, there was just a bunch of odd coincidences. And so I had this toolkit of all these interventions that I knew how to do already. So I just poured them on in that, afterglow neuroplastic window. And like, the pain relief stuck. It's like it had newfound traction and endurance, and I didn't have to cognitively drive it or maintain it. And it was the same thing with the depression. Um, I can still remember the last two times I ever had any suicidal ideation. And it was like watching it kind of emerge upward through the bottom layers of my consciousness or something. And then all these like nanobots just swarmed and disintegrated it. And I didn't have to like, oh no, here it comes again. And it's like, how did it do that? And so it just drove me into the literature. But honestly, I saw you on this video describing like, and yeah, they don't have these resources available. And so unfortunately, it comes back. And it hasn't for me. So thank you, truly. Um, and all we've been doing since then, and I say we because it's a big effort around the world. Um, but I've reached out to Psychedelics Today. I got on their podcast. I described what had happened, had private conversations with Joe Moore, CEO and co-founder of, and said, like, look, there's this research going on, and this is where I have to highlight. Like, NYC was on this pandemic lockdown. I'm inside doing all this research online, and like within 2 weeks, I find on the MAPS database this Xerox of a Xerox of the English abstract from a Japanese publication in 1962 of the Kuromaro study. Investigating using LSD, low dose LSD for phantom limb pain. And it's like, oh my God, this has happened already. They started in 1958 using 50 micrograms, 8 patients with phantom limb pain, either from limb loss or stroke. One was cancer, I think. And by the end of day, 50% of them approximately were in remission. The others with repeated doses lost it. There was one who didn't respond, though they identified him as having fairly severe psychological issues. So his pain didn't go away, but his relationship with his mother improved. So, anyways, and then it turned out that there was lots of these studies, but crucially here, again, as I was exiting the study 2 months later, that's when Dr. Joel Castellanos and the entire team at UCSD published their landmark review paper Chronic Pain and Psychedelics, a review and proposed mechanism of action. And buried inside is a case study of Albert Lin, written by V.S. Ramachandran, the neuroscientist who discovered or invented mirror box therapy, essentially using high dose, not essentially, exactly using high dose psilocybin with mirror box therapy to treat Albert Lin's phantom limb pain. And, I guess I'm stubborn and often doubtful. And so I needed the universe to make it crystal clear. And all we've been doing since then is promoting and pursuing the use of psychedelics for treating chronic pain in combination with adjunctive therapy. So, neuromodulation, physiotherapy. We've published some of the, I helped to publish and co-author one of the very first case studies, the very first case study in the world on psychedelics and long COVID, one of the very first ones on psychedelics and complex regional pain syndrome with neuromodulation. And we're pursuing many others currently right now. And then we co-founded the Psychedelics and Pain Association. So co-founded that with um, Joe Moore of Psychedelics Today, as well as with previous partners from other pain and psychedelic organizations. And we're currently in the process of getting ready to release what we believe will be the largest psychedelics and pain study in the world. So that's something we would love to have your members and listeners participate in. We also have our psychedelics and pain community on the Circle platform. So people can come there. They can go to psychedelicsandpain.org to visit all the resources we have online, including a free 7-hour course with many of your former colleagues from Imperial. So Julia Bornman and James Close, who just are finishing up their fibromyalgia study there, but also Dr. Castellanos and others are sharing what goes into the mechanisms of action. And then REMAP Therapeutics, we've been doing our own work with publishing case studies, and we've been doing one-on-one retreats with clients with very severe pain conditions. And we also have a group retreat coming up starting, it's a 10 plus week experiential program, including 5 weeks of pre-mapping, a 1 week in-person immersion, and then 4 weeks of remapping, where we're going through. So that's for 5+ people, and that'll be in Colorado. But we take people through all the pain and psychedelic neuroscience, as well as qualitative, quantitative sensory testing, non-ordinary state of consciousness navigation, and things like that. And then taking advantage of that same analgesic neuroplastic window I saw, and how do we custom fit to their individual nervous system responses to both their experience and what type of neuromodulation do they need, right? So it's not just a shotgun approach, but we're trying to very, very specifically deal with conditions of central sensitization, neuropathic pain, infection-acquired chronic illnesses, and the type of issues they have. Anyways, I tend to go on. Maybe you have
Oh,
something to say.
well, I am feeling so moved by what you've shared in your story, and also just the incredible amount of contribution since your moment of remission, which is so moving to hear about. But then I mean, you're very humble in the way you talk about all these things, because you are the founder and CEO of REMAP Therapeutics. So I just want to say that, and maybe for people listening who are feeling this really resonating with them, because we were talking about this before the call. I was saying that I'd done a panel about psychedelics, and so many people in the audience were asking about psychedelics and chronic pain. And as soon as one person asked, more people were saying, yes, me too, me too. And it felt like the whole audience was saying either they or someone close to them were affected deeply by chronic pain. So it feels so important. And I'm just so incredibly just amazed by the amount of of contribution you have made in this field in such a short space of time.
It it was really this moment, and many people talk about this, where I had done all these other endeavors in my life, like very earnestly, pursuing them pretty intensely as high as a level as I could, and then they would just dissipate or end or something. It's like, why did that happen? And then it all came together after going through the session work, where it's just like every single thing that had felt like a dead end or a lost dream suddenly informed this work. And being able to have these pre-existing skill sets and then kind of deploy them in this deploy anyways, into this circumstance in this field, and having enough knowledge to, when you're going to the somatic practitioners and you're going to the traditional practitioners, that I have a lineage tradition base, or a ceremonial base, or then when talking to neuroscientists or people that are physiatrists or something like that, having enough applied neurophysiology that it's like, and this is really where the work is going to be for all of us, I think. And I have to imagine you've experienced this more intensely than most. How do you take these wisdom traditions where they've been holding the beachhead for so long, right? And make it so that discussing non-ordinary states of consciousness, these transpersonal experiences, aren't something that are just strictly woo and foreign to people that are coming from a scientific framework, where it's like, okay, this is the language we use. It's simple, it's easy to grasp, particularly when you're very, very altered. How do we like make this so rapidly comprehensible that it's actionable, right? And it helps to stabilize somebody in that state. And at the same time, there's a little bit of this ongoing tragedy from my standpoint, where have this happen. Someone will consult with me, they'll want to know how to do something like this, and there's a certain hands off I have to maintain, because it's like, if you're not working with me directly, I can only describe what's happening to people through the literature. I can't give you direct recommendations. I can talk about people like you, but you're not under my supervision, so I can't guarantee, at least, the harm reduction practices. But early on, I had a few people where, and you'll get these anecdotal reports, someone with some type of intense chronic pain, which is, going back to your audience, frequently and often bi-directional. So someone with severe depression often will have fairly intense chronic pain. Someone with PTSD or complex PTSD will often have some type of chronic pain, and other conditions as well. And it goes the opposite. You can have chronic pain and develop those. So, and it's working on the same neurology, the same psychology. So the problem is, we'll see people go off into a retreat setting, and they'll accidentally discover their chronic pain has been relieved, right? And then they'll return home, and they're not taking advantage of that opening and doing the type, and often, and this is kind of our assertion, and because I really worked very hard prior to my dosing day, knowing all these best practices. And like, I had to drag myself to do them. I didn't want to exercise anymore. I didn't want to do visual drills anymore. I didn't want to do breathing exercises anymore. I didn't want to alter my diet. What was the point? Right? Nothing was working. Everyone's giving you all this advice. Nothing was fucking working. And it's like, but it's like, okay, here's this chance. And clearly it had this impact. So it's sad. It is sad when we see people go into these circumstances and they'll get this relief, and it'll seem like, oh, it's gone, but then it kind of comes back, and it's like, it's an impact booster. It's an impact booster for neuroplasticity. So all that talk about, the integration is crucial to this work. It's like, yeah, it really is, right? We're making even when people are going off into psychotherapy, it's making an alteration. There's someone I've worked with who's extraordinarily talented at this and themselves a chronic pain sufferer, but within psychotherapy, and they discussed with me very, very avidly, like, we're making an alteration in the story people tell themselves, right? We're in that rut, we're in that iterative rumination, but that is your reality framework, right? And it's like we are helping to actively alter their predictive processing. And so for a lot of people, though, has to happen in terms of like receptor layer, nerve glides, changing that proprioceptive map, changing that interoceptive map. And usually it takes a fair amount of scrubbing to find what works and what doesn't. And then you have to prepare for what that's going to be like at the retreat itself, because the tragedy I'm trying to describe also involves people going off into these contexts and they're getting this generalized approach, and good practitioners, experienced clinicians like yourself, I'm sure are very, very specifically trying to individualize it. But a lot of times they'll go to one of these and they'll get a kind of this generalized shotgun approach. And when they're pain free, when the depression or whatever it is gone in that moment, they're encouraged, dance, move, express yourself. And it's like they have been deconditioned for 5, 10 years and have not moved with that type of vigor and range of motion in that whole time. And they can kind of re injure themselves. I'm not saying that happens, guaranteed, but it happens often enough, right? So
Mm.
there's an on ramp. And then, like, okay, you see someone suddenly jumping. Great, great, great. I'm so happy you can do that. Let's make that smaller. Let's do fewer reps. Now let's explore that in a different way. Now let's go back to what you were saying. Let's try it in this novel way here, because I notice at this moment you are doing much better motor control than we've seen in the last 6 weeks. Can you play with that a bit here? How do we modulate that? How do we open or expand that? Can we combine that with this other drill we were doing now? Go back
Mm.
and tell me more
Mm.
about your mother and what
Mm.
she said that time.
Mm.
What, and it's this is something I talked about with the founder of Tricycle Day. I just want to make it really clear, and this is something that's also been conveyed to me very, very stringently from other chronic pain communities. Not all chronic pain is sublimated psychological trauma. I mean, people are walking in with really aberrant conditions, and there is an ongoing medical trauma that happens from that. But many people do have, so we look at the fibromyalgia community, they have this confounder of adverse childhood events. But you look at the cluster community, not so much. Not so much. Not to say that it can't be there or it isn't a factor, but you can
Mm.
think of some being in a Venn diagram of almost strictly biological, and, like peripheral neuropathy from chemotherapy for cancer. Peripheral neuropathy from type 2 diabetes, things like that. But fibromyalgia and CRPS, perhaps, they might have this heavy social component that triggers those affective networks in an adverse manner, and then that fires off all that nociceptive, nociplastic perception. So much in the same way, depressed people, I suck. Nothing I do will ever be consequential or matter. People with chronic pain, it's like every sensation suddenly gets interpreted as um, just skull blinding pain. Yeah.
I'm kind of imagining a future where everybody that has chronic pain has access to not just psychedelic therapy, but the length and breadth of holistic care and investigation and inquiry and community that you're sharing, and what a huge change to the world that would be. And it feels like it's within reach because this feels like you are holding this knowledge within you. So if we can replicate, if we can replicate you somehow.
It, it's funny. Like people have told me before, kind of how do we clone you? But I just want to assure people, it's like I am by far not the best in any of the specialties that I come from before, like not even remotely close. People that just bury me on neuroanatomy, drill application, being very innovative and stuff. I'm just oddly syncretic in my approach. I somehow see lateral consequences, and as more eyes come onto this, there are people that were doing this by far before me, like the Ramachandran study that I mentioned with Albert Lin. That case study was published 2 years before my dosing day. So I came up with this idea of like high dose psilocybin and mirror box therapy on my own, but other people had discovered it before me, right? And it's like this type of thing happens all the time. I just see as one thing we've been doing pretty actively for the last 4.5 years. So we have our annual Psychedelics and Pain Symposium where we have researchers from around the world presenting their, studies, case studies and stuff like that, often 6 to 18 months ahead of publication. But the more that people come and talk about this and share their experiences and get out of the silo, which they need to be in for their research or their application. But as they come out of that silo, they may see a hard problem in another community. And it's like, we solved that so long ago. What do you mean you don't know? Have you tried this? And then that'll innovate something new. And then they reflect something back. It's I know the mycelial network gets overused and and we can talk about whatever. But this kind of intra intra-community communication that makes that far more possible, and it takes it out of the weird realm. Not that I don't love being there. I think to get into this, I kind of had to have that whatever, but it's it's this situation that we've seen it again and again. So Dr. Costanos, Joel Costanos and we talk about this a lot. Usually when a new application like this is being developed, you kind of have a target patient who is most likely with this symptom profile to come in. And it's like, it's often middle-aged women and older that come in who have been trying and trying and trying every single standard of care approach. And they're extraordinarily compliant, doing everything they're supposed to. And like things aren't working. And they're being told, well, it worked for this group of people. I'm like, yeah, 50% of them like got better, but not this one. And finally they end up at the witch doctor. And it's like, how do you help a person that's been told their whole life psychedelics are going to make you jump out a window? They're going to fry your brain. Why would you want to go into an alien landscape where you're in? And this is the thing, pain, the worst pain known to medicine. And everybody in the general population, we don't have a reference for that. We don't have a reference for that kind of pain. But this is a pain that makes people think about, is it worth continuing? Is it worth going on? So as we're able to introduce this to more and more care teams, and they're able to inform each other in terms of what does this look like in practical application? What is it when we have these ceremonial contexts, we have these clinical trial contexts, but what does that look like in clinic and in extended service centers or providers or however facilitators. The more traditional facilitators, honestly, they should learn some pain neurology. They should be coordinating with neuropharmacologists and psychiatric nurse practitioners, examining what their med schedule is. But then a lot of these people that are hard clinicians, that are very biomechanical in their approach, they really need to get very informed what like these frameworks that are existing in there and these worldviews have this intense precipitative effect downward into the rest of the neurology, right? And as we're able to get those folks talking, it should be extraordinary.
Mm.
There's no reason to not see it. And I go on at length. I'm sorry. I just want to highlight when we look at these case studies, it often looks like, and then they took it and bam, it was great. And I was very lucky with our very first case study that it did work like that. It was a home run out of the box, and everything we did worked. And we even ran into a road bump in the middle of the, like, pretty heavy road bump in the middle of the retreat. And we worked through using the best practices and turned it into a win for them, right? And got them out of pain in less than an hour after being provoked, right? But out there in the wild, right, it's not linear. There are so many bottlenecks and things that come up. One thing that we're seeing pretty consistently now with women that are older, because of they're going through perimenopause, postmenopause, drops. I mean, Hystelica talks about this pretty actively. Our neuropharmacologist Jag Diol, who works for Therasil, she speaks about this pretty specifically, where we see these drops in estrogen causing a loss of 5-HT2A receptors, a diminishment in that population. So psychedelics are not going to refresh as quickly, maybe not as effective. So that may be something that has to be dealt with pretty early on in order to get these results consistently, right? And there's other people where it's almost like safe cracking when you're trying to find what is it in their neurology, what is it in their background, what is just the right combo that finally gets them into a consistent pain-free state that
Mm.
can then amplify with the
Yeah.
use of the psychedelics in combination.
That really resonates with it. I have a very, very close friend who I've witnessed chronic pain, the impacts on his life of chronic pain, and that idea of safe cracking really resonates. It's like how, and it's like finding the way. And then there's this dream that one day the safe will be cracked and life will be different. So I know he's going to listen to this, and
Yeah.
I hope that his safe will get cracked open. And I just want to say as well that we're going to have a Q&A with you very soon, and the members of our community, people who are listening to this, are going to be scribbling down their questions for themselves, for their loved ones, and we're going to have the absolute pleasure of an hour live Q&A with you where people can ask you all their questions. And I have a feeling that, yeah, we need more time, because even my questions alone are going to probably take up half of that, and
And
everyone else has so many too.
I'm so sorry for my at length answers. I don't
Oh,
mean to go
it's
on, but
a joy.
yeah.
There's so much gold in what you share, and I've enjoyed this. I've enjoyed ambling through the woods with you and hearing all of your wisdom. And yeah, this is just the beginning of something that feels so exciting. And this is in ASA, we're in the month of the Rowan tree, which is all about pain and what our pain teaches us about our values and what we
Mm,
care about. And it feels like, listening to your story, that you have really epitomized that experience of deep pain and deep grief, and that show, and like when you described about how all the different parts of your lives and the dead ends and the lost dreams had actually woven together to create this perfect blend of expertise and experience, so that you can, this is your path and you're offering it, feels very, very profound.
I just thank you for providing the opportunity to share it. And just, I do want to encourage people, please visit us at remaptherapeutics.com. We do have both solo retreats and an upcoming retreat in April. So deadline to sign up for that one is, I believe, March. 9th. I think so. But there's an application process. We keep the population of those low because we want to keep the quality high. And Also, please visit us at psychedelicsandpain.org. Tons and tons and tons of resources. You can also go to community.psychedelicsandpain.org to share with other people that have pain and are dealing with psychedelics. The work you've done is just, it's been so consistent and so profound. And truly, you saying what you said when you did, it would not be possible to be doing this if I hadn't followed that to the letter. It's like she described what happens in a negative outcome. I'm going to do the exact opposite of that. And for me, it worked. So thank you.
Oh, well, it's an inspiring dedication that you show. And as you said, when you're in that moment of hopelessness and pain, to be able to make yourself make those choices, bring that discipline, that takes so much.
It was a short window. I could do it for about a month, 5 weeks. I could muster myself through the depression and everything else that was going on just enough because I knew this thing might happen,
Yeah.
maybe. So, you
Mm.
know, harder over the longer term.
Yes, harder over the longer term, but so worth it, so worth it. And
Yeah.
yeah, such an important message to get out there and so inspiring that it can, the plasticity, that window with the right integration, with the right support, with the right tools, with the right wisdom, meeting the right people, hearing the right things, you can the openness, the remission, the better life, the happiness, the loss of pain, it can last. I mean, we I'm just going to hold on to that today as
Yeah.
like my beautiful flower of the day. I'm so happy that you created this for yourself and that you're helping other people experience it as well.
Well, thank you so much. I deeply appreciate it. I'm looking forward to our broader discussion
Yes.
coming up soon. So hopefully more people will avail themselves of joining the Acer community and being able to receive your knowledge and wisdom on this.
Yes, looking forward to our chat very much. And yes, hope people will look at the REMAP Therapeutics website. That retreat especially sounds amazing. So, yeah, looking forward to chatting soon. Thank you so much, Court Wing, absolute legend. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Watts. That's a lot coming from you. Thank you.
Oh, speak soon.
Okay.